cost us $3,000.
Everyone, we're going to start the Capitola City Council meeting, and we welcome all of you here tonight. And I'd like to remind the council members to speak into the microphone, and last time there were people that had trouble hearing us, so please use your microphones. We're going to reverse the order of our agendas tonight because there are a couple of community people that are here that want to speak on the an item for the joint meeting of the City Council and the successor agency. And this is where we will consider adopting a resolution approving our budget for this year. So this should be pretty quick, and then we'll go on to the regular items. So I will call this meeting to order and have the roll call, please.
Councilmember Norton?
Here.
Councilmember Story?
Here.
Councilmember Bottorff?
Here.
Councilmember Termini?
Here.
Mayor Harlan?
Here, will everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any city council comments at this time for this joint meeting? Are there any city treasurer comments?
She'll be absent tonight.
Okay, thank you. Are there any staff comments? Then we, sorry.
You're going to get another crack at it.
Good evening. Then we have one item, which is on consent. We discussed it pretty thoroughly at our last meeting, but Jamie, did you want to give an introduction to this?
Madam Mayor and council members, this is simply the action necessary to adopt the budget for next fiscal year. It includes all the adjustments that were described by the council at the previous budget hearings. And it's the resolutions to adopt the city's general fund budget, as well as appropriate the funding to the capital improvement program and the budget for the Capitola successor agency.
Are there any questions? Dennis?
I just have one comment. Is it possible that in the transition of Pacific Cove from a mobile home park called Pacific Cove, that we could give this property a new name? Because when I read in the budget breakdown of expenses and debts on, I'd like to know the difference between the old Pacific Cove and the new Pacific Cove. So is there a way we can rename it or give it some title that shows in our own bookkeeping when we're talking about debt against one, the previous
Lower and
code?
upper, maybe?
Well, no, I'm talking about the lower one and what it used to be and the debt that we incurred in that part of the project and clearing it out as to future debt and concerns of it. And so I don't like to see them joined together because I don't know which one we're talking about.
BC and AD?
Yeah, that should be fine. We can arrive at a name that distinguishes them both.
Okay. So if somebody could think of a creative name for the new Pacific Cove, that would be a good way to identify it.
Would that be a citywide, something we want people to participate and name this? Are we trying to rename the lot, or are you just talking for record's sake?
We could do that. We could open it to suggestions from the community as to a new name for this.
I mean, it's a pretty big deal if we're going to rename it.
I was taking the direction to mean simply that we would have the Pacific Cove relocation loan identified as the $2.3 million that we have borrowed with Santa Cruz County Bank. In addition, we would have the money for the parking lot, and that would just be simply identified as under a different title. Is that what you're...
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for, because when I read this, I want to know the difference of what we're talking about here. So.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a financial distinguishment.
But no, I'm really open to having a new name for it if there's anybody that has great ideas for that.
Maybe at a later date.
Okay. Pat Cove Park.
I think that would be appropriate. I think trying to coin my just off the...
all like Pac Belt, not to be distinguished with Pac Belt.
Cove Park.
Yeah, I do think that trying to name it something else would probably backfire, as the candlestick is...
No, we need a contest. We need a contest. But for financial sake, we could just call it Pac Cove Park for now.
Yeah, Pac Cove Park debt versus the relocation debt. We can make that clear, that distinction.
I like that thought. Thank you very much.
Would anyone from the public like to make any comment on our budget this year? Then would Councilmember like to make a motion on this resolution?
Move approval. Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Norton.
Aye.
Councilmember Story.
I vote aye, but I'd like to recuse myself on the community programs.
Councilmember Bottorff.
Aye.
Councilmember Termini.
Aye.
Mayor Harlan.
Aye. No additional items on this agenda, so we will adjourn to the regular city council meeting. And note that we have had the roll call and the Pledge of Allegiance, and so we will have a presentation. Is someone here from the Amateur Radio Week organization? We are. Great, come on up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good evening. We have Sue Ellen Peterson, Public Information Officer, representing the following organizations: University of California Santa Cruz Amateur Radio Club, Santa Cruz Amateur Radio Emergency Service, and Santa Cruz County Amateur Radio Club. We're very happy to have you here. Come around this way and we'll face the camera. Welcome. Did you come last year? Someone came last year.
I was here with Bill Coughlin.
Oh, good. Oh, that's nice. Well, welcome to our council chambers. Tell me your name.
I'm Jerry Inman. I'm
Wonderful. Well, we have a mayor's proclamation designating June 16th through the 22nd as Amateur Radio Week, whereas the Federal Communications Commission licenses all amateur radio operators to provide public and emergency communications, develop and maintain a pool of radio operators, and promote domestic and international goodwill. Whereas the Santa Cruz County Amateur Radio Club, San Lorenzo Valley Amateur Radio Club, and the University of California Santa Cruz Radio Club operators are known throughout the county, state, and nation for their outstanding dedication and commitment to safety and preparedness. Amateur radio operators in Capitola and Santa Cruz County provide thousands of hours of volunteer support to local agencies, including CAL FIRE, Santa Cruz Sheriff's Office, Capitola Police Department, the American Red Cross, the Department of Homeland Security, the National Weather Service, and the Salvation Army. They also provide invaluable assistance during parades, charity bike rides, running, and walking events. This Amateur Radio Relay League Field Day exercises will take place at the CAL FIRE Training Facility in Ben Lomond and also at the UCSC East Field on Saturday, June 22nd and Sunday, June 23rd. Now, therefore, I, Stephanie Harlan, Mayor of the City of Capitola, do hereby proclaim June 16th through 22nd as Amateur Radio Week in Capitola. Congratulations. Thank you for all your wonderful work. And I'd be happy if you wanted to say a few words.
Well, I'd like to say that we will treasure this as a group of amateur radio operators who represent Santa Cruz County, and we thank you very much. And Jerry might like to say something.
That covers it. Yeah.
Thank you very much for all your good work. It's wonderful. I know how important it is, especially up in the mountains, up in the San Lorenzo Valley, because they have power outages, they have had some terrible disasters, and I know that the people can keep in touch with each other and help through those kind of circumstances when roads are closed and power's out, trees are down, and that's a very important part of emergency preparedness and emergency services up there. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
May we have a report on the closed session, please, Mr.
Yes.
Verasoni?
The items that the City Council discussed in closed session this evening are those listed on the first page of the Council's posted agenda. The Council discussed with Lisa Murphy, who represented the City, along with Assistant City Attorney Adair Paterno, at the Schrodel mediation. Lisa Murphy provided a summary of that mediation to the City Council and answered Council questions. The mediation did not result in settlement of that lawsuit, and the case will now proceed to a summary judgment motion later this year by the City of Capitola. The Council also heard from Lisa Murphy in her capacity as the city's negotiator in the ongoing labor negotiations with the Capitola Police Officers Association bargaining unit. Ms. Murphy provided the council with a status report on those ongoing negotiations and took instructions from the council with regard to those ongoing negotiations. The council took no reportable action in closed session. The council then conducted a performance evaluation of the city attorney, but took no reportable action in connection with that matter. And finally, the council had the liability claim of Kyle Rupp scheduled for closed session, but that matter was not discussed in closed session this evening. However, it is on the council's consent agenda this evening. The council also asked me to report on a settlement of an anticipated litigation matter. We had received a lawsuit, a threatened lawsuit from Surf and Sand in connection with its subdivision application, which is currently in process. One of the issues that needed to be resolved in connection with that application was whether the application would require a Mellow Act affordable housing plan or not. And there was some disagreement or lack of understanding based upon the law as to whether the Mellow Act applied in this particular instance. The Mellow Act does not apply where replacement housing in a city the size of Capitola is unfeasible, and the Mellow Act describes the circumstances in which replacement housing is infeasible, and most of those criteria are actually present in the city of Capitola. However, in order to avoid a dispute on that matter, which was really a question of law as to the interpretation of the statute under these circumstances, after receiving a threatened litigation notice from Surf and Sand, we entered into settlement negotiations and proceeded to settle the case on the basis of Surf and Sand agreement to continue to provide a subsidy to the 6 homeowners in the Surf and Sand Mobile Home Park who are currently receiving a subsidy from the city of Capitola in order that they can afford to live there. Once the Capitola commitment expires, Surf and Sand will pick up that commitment and honor that commitment for as long as those individuals reside in the park. In entering into this settlement agreement, it was noted that just by virtue of the nature of the park and the housing in the park, it will continue into the future to, as a practical matter, be a source of moderate and low-income housing in the city of Capitola. So we were successful in continuing and encouraging that park to serve that sector of the housing community, even though we're not exactly mandating it as the Mellow Act would require if all the conditions of the Mellow Act were present. And that's the end of my oral report.
Thank you very much. This is, the next item are additions and deletions to the agenda. I don't think we have any tonight. So the next item is public comments. Would anyone from the public like to come up and address us on any item not on the agenda? If it's on the agenda, please wait till we get to that point. Good evening.
Good evening, Council. I'm Kathleen Johnson, and I'm here as a former resident of Capitola, a current director of Advocacy, Inc., which is one of the agencies that contracts with the city to provide services, and as a representative agency from Human Care Alliance. And none of this has to do with the budget. Over the years, most of you have made yourself available and worked very well with members of the Human Care Alliance, and we've attempted along the way to make it as easy as possible for you by ensuring that we have competent and excellent jurisdictional chairs so that you're not speaking to 25 individuals throughout the course of the budget season unless you choose to. And for the last 4 years, as you all are well aware, Will O'Sullivan has been Capitola's jurisdictional chair with co-chairs attached and has done a wonderful job representing the agencies who are funded through you, as well as his commitment to the city as a resident of Capitola. I'm raising this because this is probably the last time I will have the opportunity to officially embarrass, in a good way, Will by acknowledging his retirement from Santa Cruz Community Counseling Center after well over 11 years, and having done this for 4 years, the last time that he will speak to you as a representative of HCA will more than likely be tonight. So I want to say thank you to Will as a former resident of Capitola, who you all know my heart's still here, and as a member of one of the safety net groups that works together to provide services to your city, and to thank you for your participation in working with Will. We know sometimes he can be difficult, but we appreciate that what happens when you get to be that retirement age and you're ready to leave. So I would like to finish by saying I'm sure Will's going to follow me up here. And, and so I would like to leave on a really positive note that Will is a wonderful addition to your community, as you well know, and has been here for many, many years with his family. And fortunate for you, he doesn't plan to move at retirement, so he can continue to benefit the community and I'm sure serve the city, knowing that he is probably at times questioned his decision to be a part of the Finance Advisory Committee. He serves you well, and we're thrilled that he has been a part of our group and our representation. So thank you, and thank you, Will.
Good evening, Will. Congratulations.
Will O'Sullivan, a 30-year resident of Capitola, and you're darn right, Kathleen, I'm going to follow you with a comment. Yes, she has been embarrassing me over the years, and the other thing Kathleen provided was a mentorship for me, because long before you were having to deal with me as a jurisdictional chair, you were wrangling with her as a jurisdictional chair over the years. I really am here to say thank you to Council on behalf of the Human Care Alliance and the contracted agencies that serve the city. Council and this village and city continue to support and show leadership in that support as far as jurisdictions go in this county in assuring that safety net services continue to be delivered in good times and bad. And this may be my last official presentation as the jurisdictional chair, but I'll continue to advocate. Retirement isn't going to happen until September, so I have a busy summer ahead of me. And we at the Alliance and all the agencies that serve you just want you to know that we are grateful, and we look forward to a long future of serving the citizens of Capitola and the county, and doing it with your help, support, and leadership. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Will. Would anyone else like to address us tonight? Are there staff comments? Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. I just wanted to remind everybody that this coming Saturday, June 15th, is the Elder Abuse Awareness Day in Santa Cruz County. The Board of Supervisors issued a proclamation honoring this day, and that the police department actively is involved with the district attorney's office and all the other agencies with the financial abuse specialist team to try and prevent financial abuse against elderly. So I just want to remind everybody that Saturday, June 15th is Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other staff comments? Are there council comments?
Yes.
Mike?
We had our first concert last night, and just like clockwork, the day after the first concert, you got your postcards in the mail. My apologies to the citizens of Capitola. It was a very, very, very challenging year. Less to do with sponsors, more to do with bands kept hopscotching around. We know how grounded and rational musicians are, so it was a surprise to us that they kept on changing their dates, but we made do, and please come to all of our events. We had a good time. And I might add that your Vice Mayor, Sam Story, did a presentation at the Red Cross dinner last night at their annual meeting and represented Capitola well. It was a great night. Thank you.
Ed, do you have any?
I do not.
Sam, do you have any?
I do not.
Dennis? I have, I'm going to be going to the Leadership Santa Cruz graduation next Thursday night because we had a tentative council meeting scheduled to continue the budget discussion, but that has been canceled, so you're all off next Thursday night. We had the sanitation district meeting today, and we passed our budget, and we spend money for environmental education, clean water, so forth, and we have a staff person that goes to the schools, and this year they're going to add climate change education, and the staff person is not does not have expertise in that issue, so we are going to contract with the Coastal Watershed Council for that, and it's very exciting and good work. They're going to be at New Brighton Middle School, it's one of their schools. They also go to Bonnie Doon Elementary, Pacific School in Davenport, Valencia School, and Bradley Elementary School. They're going to teach students the basics of climate change and how they can reduce their impact locally and globally, train students to track their own carbon footprint and how they can help their school's climate impact. They may have assemblies where they will have some other presentations. They will work with the principals, the teachers, the custodians, parents, and any groups or clubs that are at the school. And then they will provide data and metrics of the program at the completion of this program. So I think it's very exciting that they're doing this, and very happy that we are supporting it. Just wanted to go over a couple of projects that are going to be in the works for us. As you know, we've all barely lived through the Park Avenue and the Wesley Street Sewer Project that is now slated to be completed July 1st. They did run into some problems in digging and running into rocks and all sorts of problems, so that's why that took so long and cost more than they thought. But we can look at, as I mentioned at the last meeting, some repairs at the pump station at Nob Hill, which is called the Soquel pump station. Should be called the Capitola pump station, but that's the one down by the bathrooms. But anyway, they're going to be working on that. They're going to do will be in design for a approximate $6 million Noble Gulch trunk line. And there will be in design for a $3 million Soquel pump station force main replacement that will go under the creek. These things are not cheap. 2014 and 15, Capitola Avenue sewer replacement on Bay Avenue and down to the village. And $1 million repair work in the Jewel Box in the Venetian. So they work closely with our Public Works Department, Mr. Jesberg. So we try to be careful and not tear up the streets twice, but to work with the Water Department and so forth. But anyway, if any of you are interested in looking ahead to see what they're going to be doing, they generally try to work on the worst lines first and take care of the problems. But as emergencies come up, they'll work on those also. So anyway,
Perhaps we could get information. I don't see Steve here, but the Noble Gulch sewer line is in the general vicinity of this year's project to underground utilities on Bay Avenue. we may want some coordination in that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so with that, we have, the next item is boards and commission and committee appointments. And we have a recommendation for the Capitola Historical Museum Board. Is anyone here from that board who would like to speak on that? Then we have any discussion about this or questions?
I move to accept the recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the consent calendar, and these are relatively minor items that are taken in one motion unless a member of the audience would like to discuss it separately, or a member of the council would like to discuss anything separately. Would anyone from the audience like to pull an item for separate discussion? Or any council member? Dennis?
I'd like to pull items C, E, and F, please. And two of those we could have discussion right now if you'd like.
C, E, and F.
Yes.
Okay. Any others to be pulled by any other council member? Okay, you want to...
If I may, Mayor, and maybe we don't need to pull this, but I did have a question about item G. It indicates that it seems like there's action needed to designate the voting delegates. So, I was just wondering how we were going to do that on a consent
Let's pull it
process.
for separate discussion.
Okay.
Dennis, do you want to go ahead with yours then first?
Certainly. Item C, the liability claim by Kyle Rump. I would like to direct staff to just go ahead and take care of this and pay this item. If that's a problem, I will throw $10 in towards the $60 to pay for this guy's rearview mirror, whether we were right or wrong. It's better to take care of a neighbor.
Just for the audience, it's a claim that one of our vehicles knocked off the exterior, the rear view mirror of his car.
I'll second the motion, and but adding that, it's not an expression of any responsibility on the behalf of the city staff, but just in the interest of administrative ease and justice that we just pay the claim. And I will not contribute $10 toward that.
Any other discussion on the item? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm
Opposed?
sorry, who made the motion on that?
I made the
Okay.
motion. Sue, thank you.
Did you want to take another one, Dennis?
Yes, I could do this real quickly, too. On item E, this is actually setting this for our agenda on the 27th, and I'd like to direct staff to come back with information on our agreement with the BIA. One of them is I'd like a review of the reimbursement procedures and whether we're getting over-reimbursed or under-reimbursed, and whether the program is working that way. The second thing is I'd like staff to come back with a review of what we see in tax increases from the village as a mechanism of knowing what the village income is for the last 5 years, and whether the BIA system is working for improving business in the village.
It's not geographical, I don't think. It's by categories, isn't it?
It's geographical.
No, I mean, it is the sales tax reported to us. It's in categories, citywide, isn't it? It's not geographical.
We can make it so.
It already is.
We do have some information that's segregated by geographical region.
Is that the question, though? The question is, what's the sales tax that comes out of the village?
Yeah, I'd like to know, since I think we are 6th year into the BIA? I don't really know. Something like that. If we could have some record as to, has this organization really increased business in the village? Is it really working to do what it's asking to do? I'm not saying discontinue because it's not. I'm just saying that it would be good to know that if we're investing in this, and we seem to be, we've taken control of some of the financing on it, and for their sake, is it working?
I don't think it's costing us anything. They're paying their fair share.
Well, that's
of
why
the
I'm asking
cost.
for a review of
Yeah.
that.
I will note that Karen Hanna from the BIA wrote me recently and said she was going to be unable to attend. She's feeling sick tonight. She wanted to be here, but she will be here at the next meeting.
Well, that's what I'm asking for it now. I'm asking for it for the next meeting, when we have, this is just setting it for hearing, right?
I understand.
Okay.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
And did you want to talk about F now?
I could,
Okay.
if you like.
Sure.
Have we gone out to competitively bid this item?
I've gotten a number of quotes from different providers. The problem is that there's very few places that can actually put in the infrastructure at this point in Capitola. So we Charter as well as AT&T, and this was after a number of this was the best
Did you look at Versus?
Pardon?
Did you look at AT&T?
UVerse, this is not UVerse. This is private networking between facilities. That was the main thing, as well as enterprise type internet. We actually have another internet connection, but those are really residential. They don't offer the reliability that what we're replacing with. We're replacing a circuit that is reliable but slow. We're hoping to get very reliable and faster.
How many communications does City Hall do between a recreation department a day?
They use, that's their primary application for registering people. It goes over the internet.
But that's the internet.
Here.
You're just saying it wasn't
here.
Larry, you just told me it wasn't the internet that we're using.
No. They connect to here, and then we go out. All the facilities in the city go out to the internet from this one location. They connect to us, and then they go out. That way, we have to, our IT department has to manage one security perimeter. We don't have to have different security policies at each location. So they connect to us via the 1.5, and then we go out to the internet from there. So this is what this proposal is to change our links between both the courtyard and the recreation department, as well as upgrading the whole city's internet connection, which includes the police department.
Okay, you're way over my head, but it just seems like an awful high expense to do it just to make a connection for a security offer.
Well, it isn't. Unfortunately, we're paying it right now, and this is the third time I've looked into it, and we're now at the point where it actually is it's reasonably close. Currently, I believe we're paying $19,000 a year for these services, and we're going to 27. That's the proposed.
Okay. Can I ask you another question that related to
that? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get too technical. And,
thank you for doing that for me.
Okay.
I've had experience with being in the offices here, how slow your computers are when we try and research them. What's the reason for that?
There's a number of reasons. One, I don't replace them as quick as I'd like because of other projects.
Okay.
And the other piece is our internet can be slow. Depends what we're trying to do. And it also depends the machine, because we upgrade, and I try and take the oldest ones out, replace those with new.
In this case, is it the internet services our problem, or is it the machines themselves?
It can be both. A little of both. Yeah, the internet service is a piece of it, as well as the computers.
And who do we get internet service through?
Currently, we are getting it through what they call it's AT&T wiring, but it's Megapath Covad, who they lease lines from AT&T as well as Charter. What we're looking to replace is that Megapath Covad with a Charter fiber connection.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your expertise in this, Larry. Thank you.
All right.
Larry, can I ask you one question?
Yes.
You were going for reliability and you chose Charter?
Well, it's not Charter cable. It's
I understand.
Charter business.
Okay.
I know. They're getting fiber around here. We're trying to do what we can do, and they were the best at this point in time.
Above AT&T?
At this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Sam, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. I guess, I'm concerned about this cost, the monthly fee for it appears to be just internet connectivity.
The bigger change in cost is the communication between the buildings, which means that
You're establishing a virtual network?
No, we have a private network, actually. Right now, we have those communication links through AT&T. What we're trying to do is make them more functional. Right now, because especially at Jade Street, where their primary tool for registering people is hosted somewhere else, they have to traverse those slower connections. So when they're doing 2 or 3 at a time, it can bog things down.
It's a four-wire system?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's what they call
I'm familiar with many businesses that use virtual networks with cable modem, internet connections, firewalls to provide security.
Absolutely.
And they don't cost, almost $3,000. Well, it's not. It's over $2,000 a month for.
Well, but the ones we're replacing, we're going from $175 a month, I believe, to $380, and it's anything you do. You're taking reliability, which there are plenty of companies. I've been at places where we've gone to that virtual private. Most of the time, they've gone back because you don't have a service level with those cable modems, and most of the time they work fine. But I don't consider cable what I would call a business grade. Even what they call business grade, they don't have the service levels they give with the other products. And that's my concern, is that some of these, they just don't have the known reliability. They're good for backups, which we do use as a secondary connection, but I don't feel comfortable with it as our primary.
Mike, I feel you're our resident expert on...
I do have some concerns because, you know, the four-wire division tends to be pretty reliable.
It
and
does.
Yet, and not, but also expensive. I appreciate that.
When you, maybe take it back. 4-wire is the T1, which
Right.
is so
It's lease line service.
Yeah, right. So you pay right now it's 175 for 1.5 megabits.
Right.
To get to the speed we're hoping to get to, it's 175 plus 175 plus through AT&T. They don't cut you, you know, they don't bundle it together. Which is we're bundling that right now to the internet, but that's almost the same. Right now we're paying $629, I believe, a month, and that's the fiber is going to, for the internet, it's going to $680. So that's very similar in cost.
So the fiber to the internet mean from
here.
From here.
From here is so that part of it. The biggest expense is the WAN connection between the facilities. That's the biggest difference in cost. And you know, for a network that I think, if we could go to some other connections, but because that is the primary, I want to make sure we have something that is up when they need it.
Because they're not processing mass quantities of information. It's not like...
Well, they don't, but I mean, they're registering people. That's their revenue stream. And during the day, we've looked at it. Everyone that's registering is coming into facility. They're not doing it from their own computers. They're doing that after hours, but during the day, 90% of the registrations are in that facility.
Sure.
So, you know, we don't want that to go down.
What about Public Works? I don't understand Public Works end of it.
Well,
how often are they using a connection between the city and...
Well, actually, they do. They do not have a server up there. They don't have email up there. Everything is located here for that. We really have 3 users up there for the most part, but you know, as part of this, we couldn't do one without the other. They're building a network for us. So that's, I would have liked to maybe drop that one down, but this was the lowest we could go for both.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Larry, but my understanding of this also, because I had a lot of the same questions and we went through, and in fact, this is several iterations down on different scopes of work where we were able to get the cost further down. But there's an ancillary benefit on bringing the fiber up to the Corp yard on Kennedy is that for the other private enterprise up there, that infrastructure is then that much closer to their facilities. And I do think that that's going to be a benefit to the city to have high-speed data, not fiber. I may be misunderstanding it, but I understood that was
They're going to be
benefit.
bringing, as part of this, they're building out fiber to those locations. They do not exist right now. So that's really what the cost is we're, you know, building it in so they can bring it to that. And in the future, maybe that gets it closer to
You know what's funny, Larry, is that I was on the council at the time that we brought, that Charter came to us with the high-speed fiber, and their big sell was they're going to take us the whole city to fiber optics.
Yeah.
Well, it took them a while to do that, and here we are, we're talking about going to another level, you know, again. So,
what city fiber optics for us or for the whole city in general?
well, I mean, the whole when we had the contract with the city, and we were the controller of it. One of the big sales for them is the fact here's a new company, and they're going to bring us fiber optics. That's what they sold us on.
I know.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there are other companies trying to get fiber down here, but they're a few years out at this point from Santa Cruz. Unfortunately, we do not have the baseline infrastructure that they have, you know, by the way the crow flies 20 miles away.
And we're a hole here, so we can't go over the air.
No,
so.
we cannot. We cannot. We've looked at, there's a couple of places that do over the air, and we looked at it. And our topography is not conducive to wireless. We can't see anything from down here.
Ed, did you have a comment?
Microwave. I just had a couple.
Yeah.
I don't want to oversimplify, but it appeared that we're going to go about 7 times faster for about just an overall $7,000 increase. Is that what?
Well, it's seven times faster at the. Actually, that's correct. That is correct. 7 times faster. Both both types of connections.
I think potential is the operative word there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and the thing is, we will have service level guarantee with this. We do have a service, I mean, we can, if we don't make it where you do not get that with a DSL or cable, you know,
Right.
they don't have that. So
So the speeds, I don't notice that they're appreciably different from what's on a cable modem, but you're saying that it's, what we're paying for is the reliability.
it's a combination. It definitely is a combination. Fiber is a much more reliable technology than a coaxial connection. I'd love to be able to go coax to coax, you know, just as instead of fiber, because we really don't need the real top end of fiber, because fiber could get us much faster than what we're doing. We're kind of having them build it, and hopefully this will meet our needs. But it does have the ability to grow if we, for some, you know, if we do even more, if we become a virtual city or something. We do have that.
Is this a multi-year contract?
It is. It's a 4-year contract.
4 years, okay.
Any other comments or questions or thoughts?
So one more time, and the cost is $28,000 flat fee for 1 year. It's 1 year service?
Yes.
It's everything, including installation, everything?
Yes, they're built, see, what they do is they build in the installation to the recurring costs. That way you're not having to up front, because I mean, I know the build out is going to be much more expensive than that, but they're going to see a benefit of that further down the road by being able to offer this service to other businesses.
And the difference in annual cost we're talking about here is $7,800.
That's correct.
Because we already have an existing $19,000 contract this would be replacing.
What's the technology under the existing contract?
It's a T1 connections, which is using the telephone system. Basically, it's upgraded telephone connections, and it is a very reliable. But it is a technology from about 12 years ago, you know, and upgrading that as a like ends up being more expensive by the time you're all said and done to get to these speeds.
Okay.
Would someone like to make a motion?
Move the staff recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion
No.
carries. Let's put the next consent item at the end so we can move on with the rest of the agenda. But would someone like to make a motion on the rest of the consent calendar?
So
Move the
moved.
rest of consent.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is 9A, a review of the Art and Cultural Commissioner's recommendation for final approval of the 41st Avenue Medium Public Art Project.
Okay, good evening, council. It's been a while since we've talked about this. This is the 41st Avenue Median Public Art Project. It started about 2 years ago. The last time that you saw the concept has been a year. So the project it's unusual in that the project has been completely approved through the process. The Art and Cultural Commission unanimously approved the final project design. And we thought that since it's been a year since you've seen this concept, and we're getting ready to move forward with the fabrication, that you might want to see it one more time. And so I brought Troy Corliss here this evening. He's our artist that we selected to show you a presentation of if we can get the screen up, of the final project design. As you may recall, this is the largest undertaking that we have ever had for a public art project. Tonight, I'm not asking for any action. I just want the opportunity for you to see the project. There's been some slight changes from the original concept. We are looking to have this installed by the end, probably in September, Troy. I think that's our goal. So what I'd like to do is introduce Troy Corliss again to you and let him walk you through his amazing design.
Good evening and welcome back to Capitola.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's heavy.
A sample of crushed glass in the black sand and steel construction.
Somebody's eye out there.
It's heavy.
With broken glass.
Oh, yeah. Bundled it way too
Well, thank you. It has been over a year since I presented my original concept approach to the council, so we wanted to just update you on the process that we've undergone in that amount of time and just explain where we're at briefly and where we're going to go here with the project. When I first approached the council with an Arts Commission approved design, we were requesting that you approve the project moving into design development. And so essentially what I was doing is taking a concept approach and fleshing out all the parts and pieces. So really discovering, quantifying and evaluating and investigating the parts and pieces that it would take to execute the project. And so what I'd like to do is just briefly summarize what those were. And so throughout this process, I worked closely with Public Works and Steve Jesberg and Lisa Murphy in collaboration of investigating the various parts that we needed to place the artwork at the site locations. And just to give you a brief overview, we're looking here at the city incorporated area of 41st Avenue, which is south of Highway 1, which is on the left side there. You can see the half cloverleaf. All the way down to the railroad tracks. And so the site locations that we're looking at, there's 3 sculptural vignettes. The one that will be placed in 2 medians near the intersection of Gross and 41st Avenue, or the Sales. The vignette which will be placed near the entrance to the Capitola Mall, are the kayaks. And the sculptural vignette that will be placed near the intersection of Jade and Brommer are the boards. There's no particular order here, but just starting from the ground up, the first piece that we had to develop, this slide's a little intricate to see, but basically I worked with Steve Jesberg in developing a site plan for the street and the medians. Since there are underground utilities and existing landscaping, we needed to identify all of those and the potential conflicts that we may run into in placing the artwork, and more importantly, identify the locations that we could place the artwork. I worked with my structural engineer. He evaluated soils report from nearby. He developed a plan and did structural evaluation for the footings and the framework of the sculptures. And then lastly, I did prototyping and fabricating R&D to develop the method of building the sculptures, just to show basically proof of concept for how these would be, the sculpture themselves, the part that were above ground, how these would be fabricated and executed. So looking at the first series of vignettes, these are the Sales. There are 2 medians near the intersection of Grove Street and 41st Avenue. The first median is the one that you would see coming right off the hill from the overpass, coming off of or over Highway 1. Those are board sale type sculpture. The second median would be the Schooner, and we'll zoom into these a little bit. So this would be sort of the appearance as expressed in my 3D model, driving down the streetscapes. You might see these. The middle section near the entrance to the Capitola Mall are the kayaks, and this is a cluster of 2-dimensional kayak forms in the large median right adjacent to the entrance to the Capitola Mall. There we go. And the final vignette are the boards, and again, these are right in front of the Marriott Fairfield Inn and Suites, and that's the median that is just to the south of the Jade and Brommer intersection with 41st Avenue. And zooming in here, this represents sort of a grove of kayaks that are in boards that are in conversation with one another in that median there. And then briefly, just to break out some of the schematic for the fabrication. I did pass out material samples to you, and this is an example of what the body of each of these sculptures will look like. And what those are a steel frame that's water jet machined, and it's sandwiched with 2 layers of clear MR10 Lexan. So the Lexan has an anti-graffiti, scratch-resistant, and UV-tolerant coating. And then the cavity, which gives it the color and the life, is colored crushed glass, which is embedded in a potted silicone. And as you could see in some of the earlier examples of the sculpture, color is a really important aesthetic component within the design, and the crushed glass is what really gives and fulfills, that sequence of color and the execution of the color palette, the complex color palette that exists within the sculpture. So just briefly here on the right side are each of the component parts that make up the sculpture. On the left is the structural framework, which defines the shape, then 2 layers of Lexan. There's the water jet machined framework, which is in the center, the crushed glass embedded within silicone. And then finally, there's actually a stainless steel rim that encapsulates that entire panel just to help protect the edges and help with the weathering. So that's it in summary. I would welcome any questions or comments that you'd have at this time.
Very exciting.
Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments? Ed?
Just a quick question. Do you have an approximate weight for the surfboards?
We're looking at about 600 pounds, and they're about 12 feet tall.
Thank you.
Sam?
Yeah, thank you. Troy, I really like your design, and it's a bold project. I did want to ask about, from when we first saw it, the kayaks were going to be 3-dimensional, and now they've changed to be two-dimensional design. To me, that's not as vibrant and as attractive when we originally looked at it. So I guess I wanted to focus in on that a little bit, and I guess my fundamental question is, that seems like a major change in the scope of work, and have we modified our contract to reflect that change?
No, I think what you see is from the design, the concept when it's originally proposed, now you go through a discovery process. And this is the process allows for these types of changes as you go through and you determine that this doesn't work, this doesn't flow, the massing is too much. It's all part of that, and discovering the cost of as you develop these projects. It's a fluid process. So the cost wasn't adjusted because it's part of the process, the discovery process.
So we got the cost right, but we didn't have the design right from the
I
beginning.
think, well, as you discover what the design is going to flesh itself out as you go through the engineering stages of it. As you can see, the surfboards alone were 600 pounds. When those were 3-dimensional, the weight was just overwhelming. So you go through those processes and make that determination and figure out how best to stick as close as you can to your design, but try to make it real feasible.
That was also a question brought up at the Art and Cultural Commission, and we started to digest the process when we first saw it in the artist's mind, and then started to understand the steps that the artist took. They weren't steps to make it cheaper for him and more profitable. They were steps to make it, and having to hold up a kayak at 2 or 3 points because it was 2,000 pounds was not as attractive and elegant as the single point connection, and still getting the kayak message in the 2-dimensional design. But yes, that was brought up.
Okay.
I would just add too that this was a late stage change, and one of the things through the panel reviews that kept coming up is that the 3-dimensional kayaks, whereas they were a very interesting structure, it was something that kind of stood out. It was like this thing, one of these things isn't like all the others. And so this is kind of the oddball, this is the odd piece out. And so, one of the things I have to keep returning to in this part of the project, in the design process, is what is the overall impression that we're trying to create with the artwork. It's the overall aesthetic impression of driving the streetscape and seeing each of the vignettes together as a whole, thinking of those as a whole. And so I, along with the recommendation with the commission, decided to go with the two-dimensional format because it just seemed like it fit better within the context of the other sculptures.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm just more concerned about the public's, interpretive sense of what this is to represent, whereas certainly the three-dimensional left no question where that was concerned. But I'll leave that. I did want to ask a question about, because you had mentioned engineering and particularly concerning the sales of, are they going to be tested in terms of, wind forces? I mean, we do have strong winds here in the winter. And will they be anchored in such a way that...
Yeah, so actually, as demonstrated here, that my engineer did the analysis for the building code, what's required from the building code for wind loads. And as you pointed out, I mean, this is the most challenging structural element to calculate for in terms of designing a structure. And it's basically this, similar to what you would think of in terms of signage, what type of wind load a sign might have to undergo. So actually the calculation's been done. It just needs to be formalized into construction documents, but that's a part of the investigation that's already occurred.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Dennis.
Well, we know that art is not an exact science, as we learned from sea otters. And so I did not expect that the first round of what we saw with the art project to be exactly what we're going to see when we... Even now, I think there'll probably be some evolution in the process. I really think this is a great project for 41st Avenue corridor. I have a little concern. Surfboards become very valuable as art pieces, and I'm real concerned about how we can assure that those surfboards, particularly the surfboards, stay in place and not be taken out. We've had a couple bad experiences already within the city where they've been lassoed and removed, we think. And so any thought on that process with the surfboards?
Well, certainly the foundation and the structure are overbuilt, so there's a deterrence there. It's a plate-to-plate connection, so it's bolted on with machined torque device, and then the bolts are distressed to discourage, the removal of the nuts from the bolts. So I do everything that I can to make it difficult to remove, so that if someone really wants one, they would have to work really hard at it, and hopefully somebody would notice that they're doing that in that process. So, it's something that I definitely think about in terms of the design of the installation and the fabrication, and I wouldn't say it's absolutely impossible, but I really try to make it something that's discouraged because it is a public location, and it really is subject to whatever that environment can throw at it, theft being one of the things. So,
what has been discussed as far as lighting, Troy?
So with the, actually, that's a good point. With the City Council meeting that we had in May 2012, lighting was approved. In terms of the details, we haven't fleshed that out yet. We've just been working with mainly the structural elements and the site elements. So I think that's yet to be determined.
With those two, that location being as far down 41st, maybe we should put more of the lighting budget towards the surfboards and the kayaks and maybe less towards the sails, because the sails will be in a very highly visible, public, well sort of lit area. That might be an idea.
If there's a surf center of the United States, it's right there, because you have the O'Neill shop in the middle of Surf City, and this is a block away. So if there's anything that we can do to give it, at 2 or 3 in the morning on 41st, there's times when there's not much traffic there, that this isn't going to be watched. So just thought.
That was the reason for my question about the weight. I felt that 600 might be a deterrent. When he said it was 600 pounds, I felt better than it being 200 pounds. So
600 per board?
Yeah, so the samples you have in front of you are a 1-foot square sample, not including the external framework. So each of the surfboards are approximately 24 square feet.
Okay.
So, that you have an example right there in front of you, kind of a extrapolation of what the total weight could be. So, yeah, we're estimating 600 pounds.
They're sinkers.
Could you put an alarm inside the center of the base of it so that if somebody does come along with a blowtorch or some means of trying to take it off, it would sound an alarm?
I think we should leave the safety of this entire art project in the able hands of Chief Rudy Escalante.
Oh, Rudy, yeah. He's a surfer.
If we're going to do anything, let's put a tracking chip in him, okay?
His name would come
Yeah,
into
but I mean, whatever else we can do, I think we should do it.
Well,
Because
there is a company in Capitola on 41st Avenue, actually, that makes a device that people put in their luggage so they know where exactly they wound up when the airlines loses them.
Well, maybe we can make a deal with them, Mike, and saying that we got to give you some good promotion here. Is that?
Absolutely. I'm not sure how long it's self-powered, but it could happen. And I happen to know that Steve's going to get a pro bono exterior lighting design by a local company, so it'll be okay.
Just put a webcam on these things.
Yeah.
Rudy can watch it from his computer.
At 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open up the public hearing now. Would anyone from the public like to speak? Good evening, Roy.
Roy Johnson.
Speak into the microphone, please.
Just a few comments. Maybe on that, maybe there's a camera on the hotel that might pick up something, not that they wouldn't have a dark hoodie or something, but and then a little sign saying photo, you're on camera, that kind of thing. And then to the point of we like this project a lot, and it's been a lot of fun working with Troy. It's been a lot of fun seeing the creative process. This is not your typical, bronze sculpture where they've been doing it for a long time. This is a pretty innovative technique of sandwiching crushed glass in stainless steel and using that, and we're really excited about that, and that was one of the things that drew us to it. So it's been fun seeing him work that out, and we're pretty comfortable that he's worked out all of the technical ends of that. Particularly the way the glass is held in there, I think it came out really, really nice. To the point of the kayaks, what it came down to was the three-dimensional ones were just way too expensive. It really did kind of come down to we were only going to get like 2 of them to stay within the budget. And that comes back to this being kind of this different kind of project that had to be engineered after we kind of approved the concept. And we thought it was more important to have a bunch of them rather than the three-dimensional. We thought that the kayaks in the two-dimensional pretty much showed, especially when you're driving by, you don't get a lot of time to scope it out anyway. And I think 5 of them, and I think that was the quantity, just was more of an impact rather than 2 of them. And also what Troy said, that they didn't quite as fit as the other ones. So, but we're really excited about it, love to see it keep going, and can't wait to see them out there.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak? Then I'll close the public hearing, and then Mike?
I'll move the staff recommendation, but I need to embarrass Roy Johnson just for a minute. He's one of our art and cultural commissioners, and we are really fortunate around here. We still have an opening, by the way, for an art professional, but Roy is one of the art professionals, and he rocked the lighting world just last week with the commissioning of the Basilica, the Carmel Mission. He did the design and construction of the new chandeliers, and it's the chatter of the industry right now in Little Capitola, our main man over here. So there's a motion on the floor.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, and thank you. Congratulations to Roy, and thank you both for all your great work.
So when will we expect to see these being placed?
Well, the next steps are to develop a notice of proceed, and then we'll be fabricating over the summer. and install, with any luck, we'll be installing in the fall.
Great. Super.
Next item is a public hearing. Also received presentation regarding the city's updated general plan, work plan, and schedule. Community Development Director Gruno.
Good evening, Mayor Harlan and council members. Since my arrival to Capitola approximately 2 months ago, I've spent much of my time getting up to speed on the general plan update and assessing the approach, progress, and status. As you're all aware, the city's initial work plan entailed much more than just updating the general plan. It essentially set out to complete a simultaneous and comprehensive overhaul of the city's land use regulatory program. In addition to the general plan update, the original scope of work also included preparation of a new zoning ordinance, a new local coastal plan, 4 special study areas, a climate action plan, design guidelines, an environmental impact report, and a host of supporting studies and technical reports. It's my assessment after reviewing the work plan that the work plan will need to be, a new approach will need to be taken to maximize our limited resources and ensure that the general plan gets completed on time and within budget. Under the revised work plan, we would decouple the general plan from the zoning ordinance and local coastal plan updates to prioritize the general plan and maximize our limited resources. With a phased work plan, we'd be able to finish a complete draft general plan for public and GPAC review. This approach would also allow us to initiate the environmental impact report process, which is important due to its critical path and time-consuming nature. Finally, we would continue to promote public participation throughout the process with the objective of developing a general plan which is representative of Capitola's core vision and values. The proposed phased work plan would focus on first completing the general plan, which is based on enduring visions, guiding principles, and broad goals and policies. Once the general plan foundation has been constructed, staff would focus on completing updates for the zoning ordinance, LCP, and other implementing ordinances to establish more specific development standards. Design guidelines can then be crafted to further define the form, architectural feature, and appearance expected of new development. Finally, the entitlement process will allow city decision makers to exercise discretion to ensure that specific projects are harmonious with existing community character. Each of these regulatory layers have a complementary but distinct regulatory purpose, which becomes more specific as they move from the general plan towards the individual project review. In keeping with the philosophy of developing complementary but distinct land use regulations, our recommended approach is to keep the general plan general in nature. While there is substantial agreement on the broad visions, goals, and policies necessary to draft the general plan, there remains substantial debate about development standards and design details which are typically regulated through the zoning ordinance and design guidelines. By removing property-specific details, design standards, and illustrations, the general plan will allow current and future decision makers with increased flexibility to adapt to inevitable changes which will occur over the next 20 to 30 years, while also minimizing the need for future general plan amendments. Having distinct regulations also facilitates efficient land use administration and minimizes the potential for inconsistencies between land use documents. Moving forward, we would finish a complete draft general plan for public review rather than releasing one element at a time. This approach would provide reviewers with a better understanding of how each element relate to one another. Once the draft plan is complete, it would be released to the GPAC and the public for review and comment. Following endorsement by the GPAC, staff recommends that a joint Planning Commission City Council study session be scheduled to provide direction to staff on any remaining issues. Public hearings before the Planning Commission and City Council would be subsequently scheduled to prepare the plan for adoption. Work on the zoning ordinance and LCP updates would continue during the general plan update process. Decoupling the zoning ordinance and general plan would allow staff additional time to engage the public and stakeholders to identify issues and opportunities to improve the zoning ordinance. Staff would also provide regular updates and seek guidance from the Planning Commission and City Council as work progresses. It is anticipated that the zoning ordinance and local coastal plan would be completed in approximately 3 to 6 months following adoption of the general plan. Due to the critical path and time-consuming nature of the CEQA process, staff also proposes to initiate the EIR. The EIR would evaluate the draft land use map that was previously presented to the Council with a generalized set of goals and policies. The EIR would also study alternative land use scenarios which would reduce the environmental impacts associated with the proposed plan. Public participation will remain a critical element of the general plan update process. Although it is anticipated that the GPAC will be winding down in the months to come, there will be numerous remaining opportunities for public input, including the EIR scoping meeting, the General Plan Advisory Committee kickoff meeting, their post-review meeting, the proposed study session, the EIR public review period, and then the adoption hearings before the Commission and City Council. In addition, individual contacts will continue to be invited and welcomed, and any additional public meetings that the public were interested in, we would be more than happy to accommodate to facilitate the public process. One of the primary concerns related to the general plan is the degree of intensity or density proposed by any new land use designations. It's important to emphasize that the general plan will not propose any density or intensity increases over a vast majority of the city. Moderated increases will be studied in select targeted areas, such as 41st Avenue. However, staff will present reduced land use alternatives in these areas to enable an apples-to-apples comparison of varying scenarios, which will better inform the public and city decision makers. I think it is also important to recognize that despite our best efforts, it would be unreasonable to expect that we'd have full agreement on all issues when we eventually bring the plan before your council. However, we will make every effort to consider all perspectives and to present unresolved issues to the Planning Commission and City Council in a thoughtful, detailed analysis and well-reasoned recommendations to facilitate any necessary policy decisions. Under the proposed work plan, staff would initiate the EIR process in the next several weeks and would aim to publish a complete draft general plan in September. A 6 to 8 week public review period would be provided to the GPAC and members of the public in the fall. A joint Planning Commission City Council study session would be proposed to occur also in the fall following endorsement by the GPAC. If the draft plan is substantially accepted by the Commission and Council, the environmental impact report would be released for public review in late fall, early winter, and the general plan would be presented for adoption in the spring of 2014. The general plan is expected to be completed within the existing budget. The city currently has a consultant contract with DC&E, the Planning Center, for $892,068, which was funded through approximately $218,000 in grant funding and $674,000 through the general plan maintenance fee. A total of $626,000 has been expended to date, with a remaining balance of $265,684. Unspent grant funding and anticipated general plan maintenance monies will be adequate to finance completion of the general plan. Any additional work to complete updates to the zoning ordinance and local coastal plan would be performed by internal staff to the maximum extent possible to prevent cost overruns. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm available to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? Mike?
I have none.
Ed? Sam?
Yes, thank you. I guess I want to start by saying I appreciate the concept of trying to streamline and pare down the scope of work on the general plan. I'm having a little difficulty of really visualizing, in spite of your report, Rich, what this pared-down version of the general plan would actually look like. I'm a little concerned that we would direct you to go out and do it. You'd spend all this time in September, and then you'd come back with something, and it may land like a lead balloon here. And so what I was going to ask and propose of whether we've already seen one element under the old model. Could we get an accelerated view of what that same element under your concept would look like, so that we have a working piece of it to test out and to go from there? That's just what I was thinking.
Certainly, we could provide a revised draft land use element that you previously reviewed. I would describe the changes as we're not looking at throwing out all the work that's been done to date. I think my review of the situation is that there's been a tremendous amount of public outreach, and by and large, there's a lot of agreement on the principles and broad visions that need to be in the general plan. It seems to me that most of the disagreement was focused on a lot of the details that, in my opinion, are better placed in the zoning ordinance and design guidelines and even individual projects. And I would suggest that some of those details, things like project designs and illustrations, be removed from the general plan, and we move those to other regulatory documents later in the process.
Primarily, I think this is after the last meeting. You'll recall we were looking at the land use element, and there were some specific details regarding the hotel property. And this is partially, Rich's recommendation is based partially on his experience and partially on the council comments at that time, saying that, look, this was just probably too much information for the general plan. And frankly, our concern was that we were going to torpedo our own general plan, that we were going to end up, not being able to get done our general plan, when overall, as Rich said, the broad vision was something that most people could subscribe to, and we were going to get hung up in the minutia and ultimately not be able to get it done. So really, I think if you wanted to have a picture for what we're talking about here, it's really that land use element without some of those project-specific details in it.
Dennis?
I'm sorry. I would just say that it would be helpful to me, instead of just kind of giving you direction to go forth and waiting until September and then potentially not liking what I'm seeing. If I could, I recall the discussion in general about the elements, some specifics that I know were pointed out that maybe are going to be excised, but I don't know that I know exactly. I don't have a clear picture of what exactly it's going to look like. And I would, I think, be more comforted if I did, if we maybe tested that one element before having to spend all this time on the rest of it.
But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I don't mean to monopolize the time. And then I have some questions about the budget. Sure. And how this impacts the budget, the money we've already spent, what's going to become of all that. And I assume that this is not like art, and we're just trying to feel our way along and end up spending all this money for a pared down scope of work, it seems to me. So maybe you guys could address that, and then I'll shut up.
No, take as much time as you like.
Yeah.
You want to address that now?
Yeah. The budget, we think we can still stay within the budget and get the original scope of work completed, with the caveat that I do expect a lot of public debate about the details that are going to come forward in the zoning ordinance. And depending on how many public meetings we have and how quickly we're able to reach consensus, there's a good chance that effort is going to require a lot more work. To the extent possible, we're going to try to do that internally, have the consultants build the framework, and then staff will take the lead in presenting those documents, making changes, and taking council and commission direction. But as that process goes, there's a possibility that we will need more money. General plan, though, I think we can complete within budget. The risks being, again, additional public outreach, a lot of public meetings, or a CEQA challenge.
And when we think about how much time in the past we spent on trying to define floor area ratio, how do you measure the height of a house, And, lots of little things like that that you can get hung up on for hours and hours. But what I like about it is it addresses Dennis's concern of last time that said, this is only one piece of it. How does it fit in with the rest? If we do see it all together, that'll be great. You want to speak?
Well, I wanted to answer another part of Sam's question there, asking about the previous work and the previous effort that had been done. And really what we're talking about, the primary difference is sort of the rollout. When we originally looked at this, the original vision was, look, we're going to bring all of these pieces together, and they're going to be considered simultaneously. So there would be one night when the mayor could bang the gavel and adopt the general plan and the zoning ordinance and the climate action plan and all of these things. It's become increasingly clear to us that that's just not possible. And so what this is doing, in a sense, there is some pairing in that we're not diving into as much detail, particularly on a specific project in the village, but with respect to the rest of the sort of overall document that will be the general plan, it's going to look, it's the same plan. We're not talking about changing that in terms of the scope of work. It's really the rollout and the phased rollout to try to get some wins under our belt, get some pieces done, and then move into maybe, as the mayor pointed out, maybe some of the sort of more difficult minutia. And at that point, we can really talk about whether or not we need the consultants involved, or if this is something that should be staff-driven.
Okay, thank you.
Dennis.
I think there's a reason why they call this a general plan. It's the fact that it is supposed to be general in nature. And that, I'll give you an example, is let's say Capitola Road, we look at that as being commercial residential mix of medium density. Well, if we create the general plan and we create a general plan to do with anything that comes up with zoning issues or that we're going to deal with zoning can be applied against those firms. In other words, we say, okay, this is the right zoning that applies to that firm. So being general in nature in the initial document, I think, is important, and I think you're doing the right thing, Rich, by separating that in the zoning ordinance. Because if we have to, we can go back and we can change part of the general plan if we didn't feel it worked to the plans. Now, so I do support your recommendation on that. I have a real concern about where we're going with the Coastal Commission. I hate to get too far down the line and find out that we are the poster boy for global warming. In other words, what if we create this document that all of a sudden we have a Coastal Commission that says, you know what, we're not allowing anybody to build within the 10-foot zone of sea level rise. As what I understand is we will be the first jurisdiction to throw a general plan at the Coastal Commission on this issue. Is that true? Not true?
No, there's a number of other jurisdictions in California that are dealing with it. I know the city of Solana Beach recently got their general plan through the Coastal Commission, and they accepted what the Coastal Commission gave them, and the citizens are rioting in the streets.
Santa Cruz did theirs a couple years ago, but so it was...
Coastal Commission give them?
That particular city has a lot of seawalls and homes that are right on the edge of the bluffs, and the Coastal Commission has imposed requirements that will limit or prohibit further construction or repair of many of the seawalls. Real estate prices in those areas are very high, and the people that are affected are upset and letting their voices be heard.
Are we going to see that along our coastal bluffs here?
That remains to be seen. I mean, I share your concerns with where we're going with the Coastal Commission. I've had some discussions. I know my predecessors had many discussions with them. Part of the problem is they're not sure where they're going to come down on some of the sea level rise either. It's an evolving process, and we're hoping to collaborate with them and find some reasonable compromise that we can all live with.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go back, and I do support your recommendation to split. I think we should get through the general plan process as quickly and as solidly as we can as a community process, and then we start looking at, is the EIR included in this budget for this project?
It is.
Okay. Okay. Now I'm going to go where Sam wanted to go a little bit, just on the budget issue. I don't know how we got to over two-thirds payment to these people before it looks like we're even a third of the way done with this process, or at least halfway done. We're way over budget with them. So I would like to see even come back to the council with some kind of proposed budget how we finish paying these guys off. In other words, I'd like to see 60 or 100,000 held till the end, till this whole thing's complete. along with it. I don't know what we have in agreement with them, but we haven't done an EIR, we haven't started zoning ordinance, we don't have a complete general plan, and we're two-thirds of the way down the line. We're $620,000 into these guys. We're way overpaid for what we've received. And we've been saying that all along. I think there's been concerns with the council that we brought up on numerous occasions that that we want to see, we want to get product for what we're paying for. And so I would like the staff to actually come back to us and give us a proposed budget that takes us to the end of this project and how they're going to get paid, and they don't get paid unless they reach certain goals on this thing. But I do support staff recommendation on this thing, and I think that we need to give Rich a handle to let him take us through this process and take us to where we need to go with the best public input, and also the quickest way to expedite the process for us through a general plan.
Ed?
Just a quick comment. I want to applaud Rich for the suggestion for dissecting. Being that I was on that committee, it did bog down early on with a lot of attention to detail, which takes an inordinate amount of time. And if we do proceed with just the general plan, I think it'll make the rest of the project hopefully move smoothly. So I support the recommendation on the plan.
Mike?
I also agree with the way you're parsing this. Excellent. I have the same concerns as Dennis. Many of us up here have been uncomfortable, to say the least, from the time we started the general plan. When we do get to the zoning ordinance and the LCP, are we able to use our general plan fees to finance that?
Yes.
So we can take it out considerably further, and if there's a way at that point, because we have done zoning ordinance changes and LCP work without consultants, that even if it takes us 5 years to just do it ourselves, I'm comfortable with that. It's good. It's a good thing. And it might even get another person besides you, the one and only planning personnel we have, not unlike Larry, our IT department. You are Rich, our planning department. I think a lot of this also has to do with, we had a lot of flux in our community development department at the worst possible time. And it's not that our interim director was faulty in any way, but she was in fact part-time. And as effective as she was part-time. And we had several community development directors. So I think in view of all of that, as displeased as I am with the consultant process, I think we're coming out relatively unscathed, and the scathing will take place at the final planning and commission and city council meeting, I'm sure. So I know it's a public hearing, but I will go along with receive the report.
I'll open the public hearing. Would anyone like to speak on this?
No?
Then I'll close the public hearing. Could we go back to was there a slide that had the timeline on it?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we have adequate time to read this huge document, that the public has adequate time to read this huge document. And did you say 4 to 6 weeks?
Yeah, we allocated 6 to 8 weeks in the schedule. That's certainly flexible.
I'd say at least 8. At least 8.
Yeah.
And so that everybody really has a chance to thoroughly review it, and that we have plenty of copies for people that are interested. The Village Residents Association is going to want to look at it. Various commissions and committees somebody on there is going to want to look at it. We have, the BIA is probably going to want to look at it. A few other people are going to want to look at it. And so that we have plenty of copies and have a real good process, because they had expressed the Residents Association, the CVRA had said, they were concerned that, we might be rushing through this and not allowing enough time to really thoroughly discuss some issues. So we want to be flexible. If we need more time, we can change it a little bit.
And I think we need to point out when we're going through the study sessions that in the last 20 years, in all the issues that have come before the City Council and the Planning Commission, how many times did we really crack open the general plan to double check? We actually don't. We look at the project, we look at how it fits, we tailor it, we torture it, and we either approve it or we deny it. I'm sorry to say, one of those things that just is not used enough, and it's more a function of government than governance. So
Good work. Good work. Thank you very much. It's going to be an interesting process. Would anyone else like to comment on this? Or?
Rich, could you bring back to us when you, in the near future, some kind of budget timeline for us to show us how we're going to make it through this project with the money we have?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Do we need a motion on this?
Well, I'd like to move, that we accept the staff's recommendation on the revised work plan, but ask them, and I'm going to add both the budget pieces that Dennis mentioned, but also coming back relatively soon with an example on the land use element of this new proposed streamlined general plan.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Very good report. Next item is consider updates to the financial management policies and to rescind resolution number 2683 related to internal borrowings.
Madam Mayor and council members, I'll just briefly introduce this while Tori is bringing up the presentation. What we're trying to do here primarily is just consolidate information. We have a resolution, we have our financial policies, and we're trying to consolidate all that information to a single point so that future city councils, future finance directors, and future city managers will have sort of one-stop shop to have a document that helps guide the city's financial management strategies.
So following on the city manager's comments, if you'll recall, over the last year, we've looked at the sample cash flow plan where the city historically goes into, the city's general fund goes into a $1.5 million deficit typically when we're waiting for tax revenues. And during that period of time, we've been using internal service funds as well as the contingency fund. In our financial management policies, it references Resolution 2683, which was adopted in 1994. In that particular resolution, it gives the city manager authorization to make temporary cash loans between and among the general fund and all other city funds, and then report the information back to council after the loans have been made. What we've noticed even in Resolution 3835, when the flood damages occurred, additional information was given where we would start taking funds from the CIP and some of the special revenue funds, and it didn't discuss using internal service funds as a resource, which in some ways implies that the general fund includes the internal service funds. The contingency and internal service funds are primarily used for savings accounts. When we increased our contingency fund, we had recognized that it provides a prudent level of financial resources for the purpose of the cash shortfalls, while the internal service funds are specifically stated as savings accounts for equipment and IT purchases. When we look at our financial statements, the general fund consists of the general fund, the contingency fund, the emergency reserve fund, our internal service funds, compensated absences, and general plan and open space. Our auditors recognize these as all general funds. However, we present them differently within the financial statements. When you look at that earlier resolutions, you could say, what is truly the general fund? Is it okay to borrow from the internal service funds if our auditors are considering all of these items the general fund? So what we were hoping to do is to provide additional clarification. After the new fund balance policy that Council adopted on June 9, 2011, it gave different options of designating or assigning fund balances. Right now, currently, all of our general fund balances, which includes those 6 items above, are listed as unassigned, which means that they're available for use. What we are going to be recommending is placing the emergency fund in the assigned category. Even on our financial statements, it will be listed as assigned, retaining council's designation that is just to be used for that specific purpose. And within our recommended policy adjustments, it will indicate that we will not use the emergency funds except under the circumstance that we come back to council prior to using them. What the adjustments to the financial policies also does is it gives the city manager the authority to use the general fund, the contingency fund, and the internal service funds and the compensated absences just for use during these temporary cash flow periods. This would not be for any long-term loans. It would just be used to bridge those short-term financing periods in mid-December and typically a couple other times of years when we're waiting for our core revenue sources to come in. So staff is recommending rescinding policy resolution 2683 and incorporating the language directly into the financial management policies and providing clarity and transparency by actually indicating specifically which funds we can use. And it would also indicate that the city manager would need to seek prior authority to using funds from any other additional resources other than the stated ones. We also report that we would also clarify that all the changes in cash position would be reported on the city's check register and the treasurer's report. I have a couple of samples of those on the following slide. But what it would also do is if we use the formal designation of assigned to the emergency reserves, on our audited financial statements, you would clearly see the emergency reserve fund broke out as an assigned fund balance. It wouldn't be listed as unassigned. In review of the sample monthly reports, on the top of the check register, it has a quick summary of the cash position. What we would indicate is the funds that are designated as unassigned and general fund, where there is the authority to borrow from. If the general fund was to go into negative at a specific point, it would clearly show that we're using the resources from the general fund. However, the positive numbers in the other funds would show as being there to compensate for that during that particular period. At no time would you ever see the total general fund and unassigned funds go into the negative unless we came back asking council for approval to use other funds. On the treasurer's report, it would follow a similar format. We would list the unassigned funds and their specific dollar amounts in summary form on the front sheet. This would include the cash balances as well as the fund balances. Following those pages, in the treasurer's report, would also list the individual funds along with their specific classifications. Questions?
Sam.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I generally support this approach, but I guess my question is, what makes the emergency fund assigned and the contingency fund unassigned?
I would say when we were looking at the different classifications, it would truly specify that the emergency fund was to be set aside to get approval prior, whereas the contingency fund actually specifies in the financial management policies that that can be used for short-term cash flow needs. So it really provides just a higher level of designation from City Council. It's not necessary, but it just kind of indicates to the public, and it's actually carried on our financial statements, that these particular funds are more have a higher designation of reserves.
But aside from contingency funds being used for short-term borrowing purposes, this would still require that any expenditures would come to the council for prior approval.
That's correct, because our budget policy says that we can't move money between funds. And if we were to have to need additional cash in the general fund to actually buy something, we would have to come back to council and ask for an additional appropriation.
Would this policy also maintain the transparency to the council as to how much has been borrowed from the contingency fund at any given period of time?
What it would do is it would actually show the general fund going into the negative. The assumption would be that the next place it would go into is in the contingency fund. So if you were to look at the sum of all the funds, you can see where the general fund is
is going into the negative, and the contingency fund would be the next one in alignment. We can show that clearly on the treasurer's report. One thing that you do gather from this method is if you were to actually book a loan to the general fund, you would see almost a steady stream of cash. If you were looked at it from a cash perspective, you would see that there was sufficient cash all along because we would be loaning. If we go through this process and we say that it's almost a roll-up, showing the negatives in the general fund along with the contingency fund being next in line to support it for these purposes on the statements, you would clearly see those dips when it does need those monies.
Okay, thank you.
Dennis?
As a safety guard, should there be a cap on this?
I mean, the question is, I think you're asking is how much sort of internal borrowing can you do? And, you know, what we know is that we go around between 15 and 20% negative every year in the middle of December, which is when we sort of reach the cash low point. And so I think what I'm hearing you ask is you know, what if we were in December and we were 30% low? And what you would be hearing is Tori and I ringing alarm bells and saying we have a big problem. You know, we have a big problem with our budget, which is a little bit of what happened in, I think, 2009 when the economy was tanking and your finance director and city manager at that point were, you know, we were having hearing after hearing about how ways to cut the budget. So, you know, to the extent this is just cash management, this is just making sure we can meet payroll. You know, the balances that are available in those funds are obviously the limit. And if we needed to go further, like we did several years ago, I came to the council and said, I'm not sure that we have enough funds in these, you know, the normal funds we borrow from, and I got council authority at that time for a limited period of time to make loans.
Well, I think I'm also saying it, Jamie, for your sake and perhaps for you, that passing over this discretion to you to be able to move that money as you so choose, is there a limit to where that? In other words, should there be a cap saying over $600,000 a year that it needs to come to council for approval? Or
I guess I would argue that this isn't any expansion of authority. In fact, it may be
restricting it a little more.
Maybe in a sense a little less authority than we already have. And every year we do borrow about 1.8, 1.7 to sort of manage the cash during the course of the year. So in a sense, this actually is controlling, I think, the authorities that we have by really explicitly saying that the emergency reserve is off limits, which today, in the policy language, I think it's in limits.
Okay.
And I think the other point, the key point that Tori made here is that none of this has to do with spending money outside the budget. All of the expenditures are all consistent with the City Council approved budget. And so what we're talking about simply is dealing with the timing between revenue and expenditure. This is not to make, you know, staff-initiated projects happen. This is simply to deal with the fact that we don't get most of our money until the second half of the year.
The only comment, just to reiterate that, I believe this is a combination of the resolution and the policy, just to simplify it, with the caveat that the reserve fund is off limits.
That's a good way to summarize it, yeah.
Any other comments? Would anyone from the public like to comment on this item? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move staff recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The last item is D, consider an ordinance adding Chapter 10.38 of the Capitola Municipal Code specifying parking meter rates and zones, the first reading of an ordinance.
Council members, I will be making this presentation this evening as our community development, our Public Works Director is unable to attend. What's before you tonight, which frankly may be a little bit confusing, and this is simply because this is the way government works, and I need to apologize for that up front, but what you see before you tonight is we are proposing to add in virtually the same language in our municipal code that we took out, Susan Westman took out 6 months ago. What we're doing is we're recommending to add back in our parking meter language that we took out into a different place in our municipal code. You'll recall that Susan Westman recommended, and she was exactly correct, that we take out our parking meter language out of the portion of our municipal code that is certified by the Coastal Commission to give us more latitude to adjust it moving forward. So what we're doing now is sort of the next step in this do-si-do, is putting it back in somewhere else outside of the Coastal Commission's purview, so that under the Streets and Highway Code, Steve and our police chief are legally allowed to enforce the rules and regulations, because the Street and Highway Code, state law, requires that parking meter zones be set up in ordinance. So the only change of any substance between this ordinance you're considering tonight, well, the two changes of substance and the ordinance we removed, one is it's got a different number, it's in a different spot, it's not certified by the Coastal Commission, and two is the words Lower Pacific Cove show up next to the words Upper Pacific Cove, so that both the Lower Pacific Cove, when it's done, will be in the same zone as the Upper Pacific Cove parking spaces. I hope that's clear as mud.
Mike?
As it stands right now, since we removed the parking zones from the LCP, are we able to change rates without Coastal Commission approval?
You will be if the Coastal Commission takes action in August like they promised us that they will.
When they take that action, will we be able to change the time limit in the village?
Yes, you can change the time limit today. That's not actually a Coastal Commission thing.
Really?
Yes, the time limit is found in our own local resolutions. And in August, you will be able to change the meter rates locally with the issuance of a coastal permit. Now, if we're changing the meter rates with the coastal permit on the Esplanade, the Coastal Commission, in theory, could appeal the rate. So, for example, if we decided that it was appropriate to charge $100 an hour, for example, I would anticipate that the Coastal Commission would appeal that permit issuance, and it would ultimately be denied by the Coastal Commission. So we have much more local discretion over the meter rates. However, there is Big Brother kind of peering over our shoulder.
But we can right now change the limit in the village to 3 hours.
Should
we agendize it and vote upon it without Coastal Commission approval?
You know, we've had this conversation several times.
Hence my confusion.
Yeah, and you know, there's one school of thought. I'll be honest with you. There's a couple different schools of thought, ways to approach this. One school of thought is that if there's consensus among the council, why not get something done that can be done? The other school of thought is that maybe the hours, the number of 2 hours, 3 hours, could be connected to the rates in some way that the only way a third hour could be palatable is if there was a rate change associated with it. And so I can see the pros and cons of saying, look, we're going to talk about rates, we're going to talk about times, we're going to talk about zones all at once. I can also, you know, hearkening back to our conversation about the general plan, maybe there's a time to take an incremental approach as well.
But it might be prudent to wait till August so we have free rein on all aspects of parking, and we can address the rates and the time, and perhaps that third hour be more expensive. Because right now we might give 3 hours, but because of the Coastal Commission's purview over it prior to August, we couldn't say that third hour is $3 an hour.
That's correct. You couldn't do that today.
Good.
I could tell you, though, if you did set the 3 hours today at the same rate, our police chief would probably be ecstatic, given that that's his number one complaint, I think, is about that 3 hour limit.
Now, I have no doubt that when we do change it, I don't have no doubt that we will be able to change it to 3 hours, that you will then get 4-hour complaints. So don't smile too much at the prospect of 3 hours. We know the public, and we understand how it works.
Ed?
I think it's a great idea that we wait till August to get the Coastal Commission before we even jump into this. Like I said, I'll just go with that at this point. I think we should wait for that before we start spinning our wheels. And also, I think, aren't we waiting back some kind of input from the Parking Commission? Didn't we designate them to give us?
You did. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, you asked this question for a recommendation regarding hours, rates, zones, and they're doing some polling, and I believe that they're going to provide a recommendation to you, and I think they think that it's due in September.
Other comments? Dennis?
I don't have problems with the proposal here. I do have a problem with anticipated 30% increase in revenues, because two things, I brought this up before, is that a parking lot that's only going to be used 4 months a year, maybe 5 months a year, and the fact that it only counts as a space once the upper is completely full, and then you add one. In other words, if that lower was not there, the whole parking lot would be full of citizens, so you'd have full meter rates there. So a 30% anticipated revenue is, I think, probably double what it's going to be. It's going to be more like 15, if you're lucky.
I'm going to open this up to the public. Would anyone like to speak? Then I'll close the public hearing. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Move staff's recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have one other item on the consent to talk about. Sue, is this your item?
Yes.
Item G, the voting delegate for the annual League of California Cities Conference in Sacramento on September 18th through 20th.
Do you want me to go ahead and present it? Okay, every year the League of California Cities has their annual conference, and which is going to be in September in Sacramento, and they have a General Assembly meeting at which time the General Assembly takes action on resolutions that establish league policy. And I polled the council, and the only council member that is planning on going to the league conference is Mayor Harlan. So it was suggested that she be the city's delegate, and since there's not another council member going to be alternate, that we're just going to leave it at that. We did the same last year.
But if someone else would like to do it, I'm going, but if someone else would like to be the voting delegate, you get the packet of resolutions ahead of time. And also, some jurisdictions bring them to the council for discussion, and some jurisdictions don't. They just let the person vote how they think that it would best represent the city, but I'm open to whatever suggestion you like.
Don't you have to take the city flag when you go, Stephanie?
No. No, but I'll wear my pin. I'll wear my pin.
The only question was, don't we have to appoint an alternate also? Was that in the, or is that not required?
Well, it is preferred, but I don't think it's required.
You
We
can go
didn't
to
last
it.
year.
You don't have to just appoint one person. Two people can go.
Everybody can.
I was already offered to go. My point is that if Stephanie, I support Stephanie as our voting member since she's attending, but should she not attend, I would be happy to be the alternate.
Yeah, great.
I move that Stephanie be our voting member and Ed will be our alternate.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Aye.
Did, just oral communications quickly, did we ever get a copy of the DSAL EIR? A hard copy? If not, could we call Soquel Creek Water District tomorrow and get one? I hear
Yeah.
they have extras.
Okay, we'll check in. I thought we
Yeah.
put in a request to get a copy.
Okay,
for you, but yes.
great. And it'll be upstairs, so if you're interested in learning more about the DSAL project and reading part of the EIR, spend some time. Don't take it home, but spend some time up there. It's also in the library, and so we can become more educated about this. Dennis?
I just have two items of general discussion, Mayor.
Certainly.
Every staff report we get, or any proposal we get in front of us, we've always given at the end of its financial impact to, it's written up as staff note. I think we should add another line item at the bottom, and I think it should be add quality of life. In other words, we should be judging quality of life as well as we judge a financial impact when we determine whether a project is good or bad. And so I would propose that we ask staff to add another line item, quality of life impact, as a line item in staff reports at the last item.
Or you mean for all developments?
Well, I'll give you an example. Is just every one of these items that we had come through here that has financial impact, it could have none, or quality of life, they could state no intent. It just should be a line item that we weigh out in our decision making, the quality of life, the impact that project or whatever it is in front of us has on quality of life as well as financial impact. Financial impact should not be the only consideration.
It's pretty subjective, though, and to have staff make that decision.
Yeah, maybe we could, if you
burden
want
on
to
them.
agendize that, so we could
Okay.
maybe discuss it and give staff some parameters of how to quantify quality of life, if it's possible. I don't know.
I don't know that it could be a one-line item, and like I said, it's very subjective, so.
I mean, that's sort of our decision, not theirs.
Okay, my other item is, I was a little disappointed in the response we got from the school board about canceling the meeting, and I really don't know what their intent is there, but may I suggest that we compose a letter to the school board directly and present our issues that we have in front of us. And we put this off for too many years. And there will be no resolution, as there is in the Middle East, unless we can sit down and we can talk about these issues. And putting it off, particularly the issue about traffic circulation to the end of summer or whenever they want to have a meeting, puts it off for another year. This is an issue we need to deal with before the school year starts this next year. And so,
I thought I'd call a couple of them and see if I can find out what their issues are or what's going on, and encourage them to sit down with us.
My suggestion on this would be that, we do have a couple council members that sit down and talk to a couple of the school board members and try to impress upon them the importance of this from the city's standpoint, because we are rapidly approaching the 15-year mark after the district gave the city notice that we needed to vacate the premises for the community center. And when that time comes, we will effectively be operating on a month-to-month lease in the community center. And the community center has maintenance needs and repair needs, and obviously we will continue to make the building safe, but there are long-term projects that should be done to that facility which I think would be difficult for the city to budget resources to address if we don't have a long-term interest. And so I think that should be made clear to the trustees for the school district. And I think your approach, Dennis, if we are unable to make progress in the next month or two, would be a worthwhile thing to do, to put the district on notice that without a resolution, we're going to have a difficult time investing in that facility.
Well, and also you can't run a recreation program if you're on month to month, because you have people sign up a couple months ahead of time. And
Why was the meeting canceled?
The information I received from the superintendent was that they wanted to give a little bit more time to work out how they wanted to approach the issues. I think that is probably the best way I could summarize it. And they were looking forward to talking to some of the representatives from the council who sit down and talk with them about some of these issues.
I think we need to do it together, both bodies, because Mike and I, can't represent all of your concerns and your views as thoroughly as we can do it together.
Sam and I we did this for a couple of years, Stephanie. I mean, we had great conversations, but every time that we had an issue, we sent it back. We didn't hear back from them for 3 or 4 months, and then it was never a positive, never an answer. I think that a face-to-face meeting may be the only resolution we can have with this thing. We can agree not to agree. We could sit there and not agree on these issues, but at least we need to discuss them, because they do affect the community in many ways. And so.
But I mean, they are an independent board, and if they are not ready to meet, the city of Capitola certainly can't compel them to meet, and they need to be, at the same place that this council is, that it is at the appropriate time, and that they have had time to adequately frame their issues so that they're ready to meet. So, I agree that it's time. I mean, this was something that I proposed, but at the same time, we need to make sure that they're in a place where they're ready to address these issues. And let's give it a chance here. But I think, in the next couple of months, if we haven't been able to work out a way to sit down and talk, we may need to consider the letter.
Well, I'd like to go back to my comment to our superintendent when they were asking for our support of Measure S, that I was hoping that we had as much cooperation after we agreed to support as before, and I am not surprisingly disappointed.
Any other public comments? Then we are adjourned, and thank you all very much for your great work.
Good job. Yay.